because of a reward. That's it. If we're tempted for a new possibility, something new that we want to try, and oftentimes we're doing it because we're looking for a reward. That's one of the things that motivates us for possibilities. But as humans, we are evolving spiritual beings. That's a divine spark in us that has been planted in us to continue on the movement and the growing of ourselves and our world. That which is impossible today will be accomplished by someone, somehow, sometime in the future that I have a granddaughter now who's 20, and I look at the world that she lives in, and she will be living in a world that I won't be able to see, and I probably can't even imagine right now today. And she's only 20, so what will it be from then on? So life wants each of us to expand and grow. There's a basic law of the universe in which everything must be continually growing and expanding and evolving. So it doesn't just happen from the time of our birth. It happens faster in those first couple years. Sometimes we grow fast in our older years as well. Some of us call this unrest that we have planted within ourselves to keep trying and doing new things. Some of us call it presence, or we can call it the divine, or love, or we can just simply call it God. But by whatever name you call it, whatever name you're comfortable of calling it, let's open our hearts to that in us that is calling each of us forward. So I would like you this morning, as I'm talking and giving you some examples, I would like you to open your heart to what is in you now and what is calling you to grow and reach out and step forward. It could be something really big, or it could be something that you haven't been able to get yourself to do before. So that's what I'd like you to be thinking about as we go on. So I looked at, as some of you know, I often do look up things in the dictionary. And impossible was defined as not able to occur, to exist, or to be done. So it's like impossible you can't have it. It's not going to happen. And some synonyms for that are unlikely, hopeless, unattainable, or unsolvable. And even as I say those words, you can sort of maybe feel yourself constricting a little bit, because it's like it doesn't feel stretching. It kind of feels like it's closing in. So when we think of impossible, it's not necessarily something that is pulling us to our growth. But our history, our human history, is the story of the impossible becoming possible and the illogical becoming real. So, as I said before, what in your life seems impossible? I mean, I can think of lots of things that in my life seemed impossible in the beginning of my life. I think a lot these days when I see people on their watches, that I think of the Dick Tracy watch that when I was a little kid and looked at the funny papers, that was it. I can still see the picture and him holding it up and the little lightning rod coming out as it was speaking, and it just seemed like that wouldn't be possible. And it's commonplace today. Robert Kennedy, when he said we were going to be going to the moon within 10 years, that seemed impossible. And at the time that he said it, he had no steps, no way of knowing how it was going to happen. And that's an important thing to remember, that we don't necessarily know the how, but if we have the vision and we can take one step toward it, one step begins the journey. It's been said that the difficult is easy, but the impossible will take some time. So another example that we have in our world right now, just very recently, was, and I'm not talking about which side you were on of this or are on of this, but we had COVID that came in that hit us. At first, we kind of were like, well, that's just over there. That's not something we need to worry about. It's just over there. I can remember myself going to the doctor's offices when they added a new question when you came in. Have you been in contact with anyone from Asia? And then it became more and more, and it became frightening, and we became blaming people for the fact that it happened. We began blaming countries, and we began worrying about how it happened, and they're still doing that today. For me, what I see is we took something that felt impossible when it came, and it did create a lot of devastation, but in a very few short years, we developed the vaccine. And again, what side you're on of the vaccine doesn't matter. What we're looking at today is how quickly we were able to come to a solution, and we did it by taking little steps at a time. And now just recently I've heard that now they do have a new vaccine, and it's probably going to be, which they did say in the beginning, it's probably going to be like the flu vaccine, where we'll get a new one all the time, every year, and try to fit what it is for that year. So, Spirit, that spark of the divine that we talked about this morning, is calling each one of us higher. It's calling us higher, and I think that's one of the things that we're seeing now also in our country, is that we're being called higher, to join more together. We've become very separated, and to join more together. So we're being called higher, and I don't know what it is for you. And that's kind of the fun of it, because each one of us has our own idea of what it is we see. But when we start, it may seem impossible. So instead of calling it the lure of the impossible, what if we call it the lure of the possible? The lure of what's possible for us. What's possible for me in my life, even though, and it doesn't matter what my age is, or how much money I have, or where I live. We all have that within us. Okay, so all things that seem impossible to the world, we will get someday. So that's something to just seed, to just plant. It's like, at this end, I'm at the other side of my life. And I can say, well, I'll never get to see it happen. But that doesn't matter, because this little one here is going to get to see it happen. My 20-year-old granddaughter is going to get to see it happen. This will take us, our world, to the next level. So it's important to know that what I do in my life also affects the rest of the world. Now, it's been said that when a butterfly flaps its wings, the vibration is felt on the other side of the world. So if we think of ourselves like that, we know that everything is vibration. So when we think of ourselves like that, and we think of possibilities moving us to a higher vibration, we know that we are affecting others. Now, another thing that I wanted to talk about is, how do we get motivated? How do we get motivated to take whatever step it is that we need to take? Because sometimes it can just look so big. And when we do prosperity consciousness, they tell us to set a goal that's so big that makes us really stretch for it. But sometimes if we set that goal so big, we'll be afraid to try, because it just seems like it's not going to get us where we're going. So we need to have goals to motivate us. And it's been said that two things motivate us to move higher. It's either moving away from pain or moving towards pleasure. So if you think about it, I think maybe you might be able to think of a time in your life where you just were doing something, and then you just kept doing it and doing it and doing it, and it just kept getting so painful that you finally decided to make a change, and it didn't matter because it was just, I just want to move towards pleasure. That's one of the motivations that we have. And so the thing that we're looking for is probably what we think is going to give us pleasure. And that's okay. It doesn't matter what motivates us. So when we start to move along our way to unfoldment, we have to remember, as a child of God, we are limitless. Each one of us has that ability within us. And that's what I want us to think about today. It's like, what are my possibilities? What's a really tiny, small step that I could take? You know, and another thing that's been said is that if you're on a ship and you make, and I don't know what they call the wheel of the ship, I guess, one small turn, and if you stay in that one small turn, if you were heading this way, just one small turn, and you're going this way, and by the time you get to the end, instead of ending up there, you're ending up over here. So that's something to remember as we take a step, as we try to figure out, what can I do? You know, the questions we often ask ourselves is, what happened? Why did this happen to me? We're trying to figure all that out. But that doesn't matter. What matters is, what am I going to do today? What am I going to do today so that I have a better feeling of my life? All of us, one of our possibilities is, I want to feel happy today. Just that, maybe just that could change. Can you think how that would change your life if I'm just going through life wanting to be happy? I know it changes my life. If I wake up in the morning and I don't have the best ideas going forward. So we have to think about, what action is it that we could take? What action is it that we could take to move us to that next place? And again, sometimes it can be just a little action. And what I've been playing with this myself for a week or so now. And I did, some of you know, I like to watch master things on YouTube, and I watched one recently, and it was called Own Your Future. And I thought, well, now that's an idea. I wonder what that's going to be about. And then I thought, well, that's for young people, you know. And then I thought, why not? What would it be if I got up every day and thinking, I'm going to own my future? It's today. And you know what? Whether we're young or old, our future is today. This is the only day that we have. So we don't want to get stuck in the I can't. Another thing that I learned recently is it's about something called stacking. And when we get into like maybe a negative place and we start thinking about, well, I'm too old to worry about my future. I can't do anything about it. I can't do anything about what's happening out in the world. I can't do anything about, I can't. When we start doing that, and I know my brain does that once I get on that merry-go-round, it keeps going. And that's called stacking the negative, because we're putting one on top of the other, on top of the other, until our feelings are in the negative. Well, guess what? We can do it the other way. We can stack the positive things. What I can do today is maybe make that phone call I've been putting off. What I can do today is get up 15 minutes earlier and go outside to walk. What I can do today is start writing. What I could do today is start meditating. What I can do today is begin with the vision of what I want to see, and what step can I take to get towards that place where I want to see. And that is stacking in the positive. And what that does is it starts to lift our spirit. It starts to lift our minds. It starts to lift us. And as it starts to lift us, and we share that with all the people that we come in contact with in the day, or even just people that we hear on the phone, that we talk to on the phone. And so as we do that, it starts to lift us. And as we start to see possibilities, we begin to see more possibilities. And as we start to do that, we begin to trust it. We begin to see, oh, I think I can do this. And then we try it. And gosh, maybe it works perfectly, and maybe it doesn't. Maybe some things just, okay, so all I need to do is make another adjustment. Another part, so that's the action. That's one of the actions that we take. Another action that we take is, what is it we're willing to let go of? We often talk about letting go of things, but what is it that we're willing to let go of? Once we start doing this, we really start to notice what it is we're doing. And we still start to notice more and more things. And I can tell you from personal experience, a lot of times those things that we notice about ourselves that we didn't notice before are kind of embarrassing. But that's okay, because we know and we affirm that that divine spark of love within us, that spark of God within us, is bringing us along our way, is bringing us further along the way. Our brains, not our wisdom, our brains are programmed to keep us safe. They're programmed to look for the danger and do what we can to avoid it. And that's why when we start getting on that negative ride, it starts spinning faster and faster, because it's trying to keep us protected. And that negative energy is bringing us down. But we can change that, because we're divine beings, right? And so we can make a choice and say no to that. I'm going to choose a higher vision, a better vision. I'm going to choose a better vision for the world. One of my visions for the world right now, or for our country right now, is that we begin to be kind to each other again. And we begin to talk to each other again. And we begin to recognize that if you don't have the same belief that I do, I don't have to make you my enemy. I can make you my friend. And when I make you my friend, I can start hearing what you have to say. And maybe you'll start listening to me. And so this moves all of us higher and higher. Each one of us has done difficult things that we thought were impossible. And we have to learn to look at some of the things that we've done that we thought weren't really that good, and some of the things that we've done that have maybe held us back in our past. And one of the things that we can learn to do is change the way you look at something. I think it's Wayne Dyer that says that. Change the way you look at something, and what you look at changes. And an example of this that I've been able to do since I've been paying attention to this is, my life has been a very eclectic life. I grew up, I got married pretty young, I had kids, I was a wife, a housewife for a while, and then I started working out in the world, and, I had done sales, so, I started out with sales jobs, and then I moved from one sales job to another one, and then a friend of my then husband was working with a private investigator, and the sales that I had been doing were sales with fabrics. And this investigator had a job where a woman who had worked for a major company in their fabric department had hurt her back, and so she was getting 100% for years, 100% disability from this company. Meanwhile, she had her own company running in a little town. And since I knew about this, he asked if I would go and, investigate. And I'm always curious. People that know me know it. It drives them crazy sometimes. So I went. What did I think it was possible for me to do this? Because one of the things that I had to do was pretend that I was a college student in the town. I was 28 years old. And I thought, they're not going to believe this. They believed what I told them, Moved on from there. Ended up working I lived in Philadelphia at the time, for a company in Philadelphia, a big company in Philadelphia. Worked with computers. I didn't know anything about computers. We didn't have computers when I grew up. But I learned just what I needed to know. This goes on and on. I ended up going through a divorce, and at that time, I live in Tri-Cities, or actually, I lived in York, Pennsylvania at that time, and it wasn't 3 Mile Island. It was called Peach Bottom, but it's a nuclear power plant, still online today. Had the opportunity, because when I went to school, I took all the college prep stuff. Had the opportunity to take the testing, which was a lot. You had to take a test and study something for a couple days, and pass that test, then you could move to the next test, and then there was the physical test, and there was the mechanical test, and there was just one after another until. Thank you. I heard you whispering. So what I'm. Yep. Okay. So at that point, this is what happened. And I'm telling you this because I looked at that as a negative thing. I looked at that because when I grew up, you got a job and you lived it, you worked at it for life. Your goal was to get the gold watch at the end of 25 years. And I wasn't living that. I was living changing, growing. The things that happened along the way gave me knowledge. It was not a college education, but it's an education that I got from the world. So I've been able to change how I look at that, as it wasn't something that was a failure. Isn't, because I'm still doing it. I haven't stopped doing it yet. I don't know what's coming next, to own my future. And I'm sure that each one of you, maybe not as many as I've had, but each one of you have things in your life that you've been heading one direction, and the next thing you know, you're heading another direction. And that's the important thing about this. If we can just stop, get quiet like we did this morning, ask God, ask the divine, ask whatever name you call it, your higher self inside, your inner child, whatever it is, what is it that I am to do? Just starting with today, just get quiet and ask. And then take the action that you receive. Even if the action doesn't seem to have anything whatsoever to do with where you're going or where you want to go. Whatever action you take, something will come along the way, just like that story that I just told you. I had no idea that I would ever be standing here in front of you guys talking and sharing the things that I've learned through the good things and the not so good things that happened in my life. And each one of you has that ability. And that's the thing that I hope you can take today from this, that there is that in you that is always ready and willing to grow. Remember that you don't do it alone. Even Jesus said, even Jesus said, of myself I do nothing. He did everything with the help. He always knew and affirmed that he partnered with God. And to me, that's what's important, because a lot of these things I can't figure out on my own. I don't have the big picture. So I want to end with this from a quote from the book, Celebrate Yourself. Remember that there is a future of you that you do not know yet. You can, if you refuse to be cowed by the giants of impossibility and follow the guidance of the creative urge within you. As the stately oak tree is the acorn, so the perfect person is within the person you are now. And part of this that was talked about was that there was a gentleman that was carrying an acorn in his pocket. And if we remember the fact that he pulled it out and he said, this acorn can grow into a mighty oak tree, but it's not going to grow in my pocket. I have to nurture it. I have to give it what it needs. And we need to give ourselves permission once again to nurture what's going on within inside of us. You may not achieve your goal overnight, but the principle is exact. There is an allness within every illness. There is an all-sufficiency within every insufficiency. And there is the fullness of what we refer to here as the Christ light in every person. Don't settle for anything less.